welcome to our do-it-yourself tutorial for a Bumblebee Transformers costume. Now, as with all of our other costumes, what we always do first is prepare the clothing and decide on the colors. This is important because it's very difficult to find specific color fabrics, especially if you're buying clothes from the store. And it's much easier to match the paint from the hardware store to your existing clothes rather than the other way around. So what you see here is what I like to refer to as the classroom costume. And the reason we have a classroom costume is we're assuming that your kids will be wearing their costumes on Halloween and all day at school. And as cool as it might be to have a Transformer car shell around them, they won't be able to wear it all day at school and sit at their desk and do their regular duties. So it's important to make sure that your kids still are in character even when they're not wearing the full costume. What we have here is a pair of shoes, black pants, and a shirt. We actually sewed this shirt and sewed the design. You can see this is an approximation of the front end of a Chevrolet Camaro with the grille, the headlights, and then the fog lights at the bottom, and some black stitching around just for some extra detail. Now on the back, we also sewed on a logo. We're very lucky that Grandma is a very good seamstress, so she was able to do that for us. We've been toying with the idea for future projects rather than sewing this. If you go to the fabric store, they do have iron-on fabrics, so you can actually trace out a design and cut it out the way you need it and then just iron it straight on. So that's something to consider when doing your costumes. You don't have to hand sew everything yourself or even pay someone to do it. One other option is to actually buy a real Bumblebee costume that they sell in the stores, kind of like those spandex suits. Those are really cool because they have a lot more detail. This actually is a little bit on the plain side. So the store-bought costumes, you'll have all sorts of gears and wheels and pipes and attachments and stuff. The reason that we didn't go that route is because we actually compete at Comic-Con festivals, and the rules very clearly say that it has to be all self-made, no store-bought costumes. So we went this route. The shirt, we went to the fabric store and just bought the most basic pattern for a pajama top, and we chose the brightest yellow that we could find. We find that the use of primary colors, the most intense and bright color that you can get, will just help the overall impact. It's going to come out really nice in videos and pictures and just have that wow factor on the spectators that are watching. Now the pants, they're just basic black pants, black jogging pants. You could use jeans, I suppose, or cargo pants, but nothing terribly special here. And then the last part is the shoes. These shoes we got from Walmart, and actually, if you take a really close look, you'll see they're actually Tonka truck shoes. There's a picture of a dump truck. If you look far enough away, nobody will notice. The reason that we chose them is A, the colors are perfect. You've got your black and yellows. Now there was a logo here with big red letters that said Tonka, so all we did is take a little bit of silver duct tape and taped it off. And that tape has been in place for over a year now, and no signs of coming off. These shoes cost us, what, $12 on clearance at Walmart. So always keep an eye out. It's possible to get stuff really cheap. And they're also really cool because they've got lights in them, so it just adds that little extra dramatic effect to the finished product. Once we have our clothing figured out, and as always, most important is the colors. In this case, the only real color that you have to worry about matching is the yellow. Then we can move ahead and actually start building the rest of the costume, the exciting part of the costume. And then it will be very easy for us to go to the local Home Depot paint counter and bring your shirt with you and tell them that you want the closest possible match color paint to the fabric. So now that we have the colors and fabrics and clothing figured out for our classroom costume, we can go ahead and start planning the dimensions for the car. We're going to start shortly by building the inside framework for the car. The first thing we're going to do is try and figure out the basic dimensions of the box. So this is, imagine this as a top-down view, and I find this method works. Now the measurements will be different for your child. Our boy was actually a size 3 when we made him, so it's actually quite small. Now to figure out the basic dimensions of the box that we want, we'll imagine a box, and let's say this is the front end, this will be the rear end. We want to split that into 3 sections, more or less equal sections. So this is going to be the front hood, this is going to be the windshield and roof, and this is going to be the rear end. Now the frame that we're going to be building will actually only fit in this part of the costume. So imagine your child's shoulders are going to be here. We're going to have a wooden frame going down the length of the car, and it's going to end somewhere approximately halfway in the last 1/3 section, so somewhere along here. So how do we figure out the measurements? Well, as with our other costumes, we build the frame first. So to figure out the measurements of your child, we're going to get them to go down on their hands and knees in a crouched position, and we are going to measure from their shoulders almost to the end of their bum. So as with our other costumes, we go about 1 inch before their bum, and it'll be an easy spot to notice, because you'll see right where their bum starts to curve away. So if you imagine, the frame will actually be sitting along their body. Their back is going to come out a little bit like this, and their bum is going to be like so. So the frame is actually going to be sitting a little bit lower than the top of their body. This section will be taken up by the windshield and roof line. 3 measurements that we will need. First of all, when making our frame, is the total length from shoulders to about 1 inch above their bum. We also need to know the width of their shoulders, and okay, so two measurements. So when we have our wooden frame like so, their body should be able to fit snugly through this hole and opening. So go just as wide as you have to to make sure that the rest of their body, their back and part of their bum is able to fit inside here, with the frame ending about 1 inch above the very end of their bum, where that curve is. So as with all our other costumes, the secret to our success are these. These are wooden paint sticks that you can get from the Home Depot at the paint counter for free, or any other hardware store. Usually we're able to get about 5 or 6 of them without raising too many eyebrows. For our Bumblebee costume, we use the smaller standard paint stick, which is 1 inch by 12 inches long. These things are great. They're very lightweight, they're flexible yet strong, they're easy to cut and easy to drill. If you have a larger child, you can always get the larger sticks. But that's basically what we use to do the underframe. The reason that we do an underframe is it gives a rigid structure so that it doesn't wear out. All the pieces will, once connected, are going to fit together really nicely, and you're going to get a perfect transform every single time. So your costume is going to last a lot longer, and it's not going to warp or tear or break. So that's it right there. So we start with cutting the shoulder piece. This is the same width as your child's shoulders. In our case, it is 9 inches. He's quite small. I might have mentioned already we're doing for a size 3. So 9 inches, and I've got these 2 longer pieces which will be going the length of the body. For those ones I did about 11 inches, but you'll have a way of figuring that out once we get more of it put together. So we'll start by gluing the pieces together. Now you're going to want to get yourself some type of a square. I have a square ruler here. It doesn't have to be a ruler, a box, a brick, or anything. But you do want to make sure that when you are gluing this together, that it is as much as possible a right angle. It will just help with your construction later. Before you start any construction, this would be a good time to mention, get yourself a good quality glue gun. Not the little dinky ones you get from the craft stores, but from the hardware store. This one cost me about 20 bucks. I've had it for years. It's 80 watts, the dual temperature. I always use a high temperature setting. It uses the big thick glue sticks. Once you glue wood or cardboard with this, it's like a weld. It will never come apart. So definitely invest in a good glue gun. And you can always verify by measuring the space in between. So here I have 6 3/4 inches, and I want to make sure I have the same at the bottom. So I've cut out some of the other, the rest of the pieces for the basic frame. So to help give you an idea, these are the shoulders of the front windshield. This will be the sides where the doors will be. You'll notice the back here tapers a little bit, so this will be the back window. On most of those types of cars, the back window is always a little bit smaller than the windshield, and that will also help when we're making the cardboard portion, give the rear fenders, the whole rear end, a more beefy appearance, like a real muscle car. So what I've done is I've taken an extra piece and used it as a spacer. So the rear piece is approximately 2 inches shorter than, or narrower than, the shoulders, and I've put it here. In this case I actually made it exactly shorter than 2 of these thicknesses. So when I use this as a spacer, I can very easily place it here, and that just helps me keep everything aligned down the middle. Once I've done that, I've gone ahead and cut two of these pieces. You'll see there's a diagonal cut. The way to figure out what the diagonal will be is to just put a standard piece of wood underneath and then just mark it off, and go ahead and use your razor saw to cut the appropriate angles. Now, in terms of actual measurements, what I find is I use ratios. So I can't give you specific measurements, but what I can do is give you ratios. So this is essentially the full length of the child's body, from shoulders to just about 1 inch above their bum. Their back will be, their whole body will be accommodated in this area. So to figure out how long you want these pieces, I just divide everything into 4 sections. So as a good approximation, I found that these dimensions work quite well. You're going to want this section to be approximately 1/4 or 1/4 of the overall length of the body. Once we are satisfied with the measurements that we want, we'll go ahead and glue all the pieces together. So we have the 2 small pieces for the rear section glued together. To make sure that you have your angles correctly, what you can do is, while the glue is still hot, just put the piece over here, and the space in between the edges here should be the same as over here, and that way you know for sure that you've given yourself a nice symmetrical frame. And the last thing that we're going to need to do is glue the front section and the rear section together. Hopefully you saved some of those extra pieces that you cut off, and I cut them into 2-inch lengths, and we are going to be attaching them here to connect the front and the back. What we do is we line it up on the inside. You'll notice there might be a little bit sticking out, but don't worry, we can trim that off later. I've also marked a center line down the middle. So basically that center line is going to align with the edges of the front and rear pieces, and we go ahead and glue those together. You might want to put a little bit of glue to actually connect the ends as well. So it'll be glued from the bottom and from inside. So with our frame done, we are going to prepare it to accommodate the shoulder harnesses. There's one more step that we have to do before the installing the shoulder harnesses. One thing I want to bring to your attention is that these bars are on top, and these cross bars in the back and front, and these little stubs are on the bottom. So this is the top, this is the bottom, if that helps. Alright, so what we can do now, we're going to flip it upside down so that this crossbar is now higher. When we are installing the shoulder harnesses are going to be made with a regular coat hanger, and we're just going to cut out the straight sections that we need. We also cut out a few small pieces of wood, and these little pieces of wood are kind of like spacers. It's going to keep the wire in the proper position. So putting the wire in its place, we will glue these little bits on both sides, and we'll take out the coat hanger while the glue is still wet, and make sure to scrape out all the extra glue. And this is going to create a nice little pocket to hold our wire hangers in place while our kids are wearing their costumes. We want to make sure that it's a nice snug fit to have as little wiggle as possible. So what we end up with is two sections. Mine I did about from the middle of this to the middle of the entire frame, about 2¼ inches. You want to leave yourself about 1 inch away from this inside edge. You might have to play with a little bit. For my child, this is the sweet spot where the harness can fit around his neck and over his shoulders, but not too far out so as not to interfere with the movement of his arms. For the shoulder harnesses, we start with a wire coat hanger. Now, I recently realized not all coat hangers are created equal. Some are thinner than others. So try to get the beefiest, thickest one that you can. It will just help carry the weight of the entire costume. Essentially, the entire costume will be resting on 2 hooks that will go over your child's shoulders. So we cut ourselves approximately a 9-inch section. You could do what I did, which is to cut out a part from here and then just straighten it out as best you can, or just get 2 coat hangers and cut out the straight sections. We can take an extra piece of wood to help us fold into the right shape. We're basically trying to make something that looks like this. This one was a little bit too short, so I made new ones. So what we want to do is have a short length like so, and we're going to be bending around there, around the wood. Once we know the general place that we want to put our bend, we can use our vice grips to do that, and it's going to slide over the wood nice and snug. Looks pretty close. We're going to take our frame, this is the top, and with the little guide thingies on the bottom, we're going to put these in and try and get that all the way up as much as possible. Once we've done that, we can go ahead and fold these guys down. And the last step, like so. So this is basically locked into place. It's not going to slide. You will have some lateral movement. That's okay. It will adjust to your child's body. But the most important thing is you have a lock in place so that these will never bend too far out of place. They're not going to slide sideways, and they're not going to undo. So we end up with the piece, with the frame that looks basically like this. Now, in hindsight, it might be a good idea to make these a little bit longer. It's a lot easier to fold them over the longer they are. This one was quite difficult to bend because it is so short, and we don't want to risk breaking the frame, but that's essentially what we want. So the last thing we need to do is give some shape to those, and I use this is a can of spray paint, and we put it at the bottom, and then we roll the can. Once we have our basic frame set up for the shoulder harnesses, we have to make it comfortable for the child. And we're going to do that by padding it with 1-inch weather stripping that I purchased from the Home Depot. I just got the cheapest stuff I could. It is self-adhesive on one side. And we're going to cut 4 sections. Let's say, depending on how long this is, you want to go a little bit longer, say 1/2 inch to 1 inch. Once we have our foam cut, we will peel off the paper and starting from the inside, make sure that the wire is down along the middle, and we'll attach that with a second piece from the top. Like so. Once we have those pieces attached, we can cut off the extra, and then we're going to wrap the whole thing in electrical tape. We have our electrical tape here, also from Home Depot. It cost me 99 cents. And we will start by wrapping around our weather stripping. Now, you can squeeze it down a little bit so it's not quite so puffy, but try not to squeeze it down too much, because in the end the whole point of this is to actually have some cushioning for your child's shoulders, and this will make sure that the foam pieces never come apart. Looks a little bit better, but in the end you don't have to worry too much about how it looks, because this is going to be deep inside the costume, so nobody will ever see it. Functionality is the most important. Comfort. If you don't do a good job taping, don't worry about it. Don't stress. Nobody's going to care. So the last step is to attach the hinges. Bumblebee doesn't have any metal hinges. They're all fabric hinges. And I used a combination of Velcro, double-sided Velcro, and 1-inch polypropylene strapping. If you can get this in the black, that's great. Otherwise, just paint the white. If you can get the black, you'll save yourself one step. So I use the double-sided Velcro for attaching the front end, and the reason I do that is because when we attach the front end with the doors, we want to make sure that they don't get caught while they're transforming. So over time, wear and tear, or just bad, inaccurate construction, if you don't want them to get caught. So it's really important to be able to detach the front end from the body and then make adjustments as necessary. And I find with the double-sided Velcro, it's super easy, no tools required. So we're going to glue our Velcro right here. Maybe give yourself about a 1/4 inch clearance, not all the way to the very edge. And we're going to go and glue. You want to put a lot of glue. You want to make sure that this hinge holds and that every single part of this Velcro is smothered in glue. Now it might get a little bit messy, but don't worry about it. Not a big deal. That's a part that nobody's going to see. Now, one option that you have, if you are concerned and you want a little bit of extra strength, you can go ahead and cut some wood pieces and sandwich that in there to make absolutely sure that that part will never come undone. I didn't have to do that, But if you do find in your own construction that it is a problem and it's starting to peel off, then just stick another piece of wood in and sandwich it there, and that will give you a super strong connection point. So again, give yourself about a 1/4 inch space, heap on the glue, now as far as the hood is concerned, we are going to use our polypropylene strapping. One little hint that I'll give you with this stuff is don't cut it with a pair of scissors. Cut it with a soldering iron. The reason that is because it frays very much so. If you use a soldering iron, you're going to get a nice clean edge that will never ever start to fray. Another option is to cut it with a pair of scissors and then use the glue gun and the hot element and just go back and forth. This way takes a little bit longer because the glue gun is not quite as hot, but eventually it will seal the ends. Or you can even use a lighter just to burn it. Polypropylene is plastic after all, so once it's melted you'll have a nice solid edge that's not going to fray. I'm going to use straps. If you want adjustments on the hood as well, go ahead and use the Velcro. So I've got approximately 6-inch pieces here, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to start from the bottom, and this is just going to help me seal everything up with the shoulder harness. So I'm going to line it up from the inside of the shoulder harness. So once we're done, this shoulder harness is glued. It's got wooden guide rails, and last but not least, it also has polypropylene strap holding it all together. So that should last the lifetime of the costume. Now, if there is going to be a little bit of overhang, if your straps are wider than the shoulder harness, I would line it up here, put the overlap on the inside. We're going to glue here and all across the back, or you could just continue as we're doing the whole thing, and apply as much pressure as you can. Try and smooth out that glue everywhere. Be careful, it's hot. While we're doing that, we just want to make sure it lines up or is in a straight line as much as possible. But since it is fabric, it's actually quite forgiving, so even if it isn't perfectly straight, there are ways of making it straight later on. So in the end, we end up with something that looks like this. We've got about half an inch or 3/4 of an inch to an inch spacing between these guys here, and your frame will be ready for attaching the hood. And this is for the hood, and this is for the front fenders. Again, if you are concerned about the glue not being strong enough to hold these straps in place as the hood folds back, you can always put your mind at ease. Cut a piece of wood and just sandwich it like so. So I've actually gone ahead and put those little pieces in, and you only have to cover this portion. You don't have to cover the whole thing because you still have the wire coat hangers sticking out, but that's going to give you a super strong attachment point. It will never come apart. And I've decided we're going to go ahead and do the same for this as well, so that when the front end folds down and the weight is pulling it down, the wood will act as a stopper to keep it from to keep it from pulling itself off. So I've already pre-cut those. You want them just a little bit shorter than here. You don't want them interfering with any part of the other frame. So give yourself maybe a 1/4 inch shorter. And again, we just use enormous amounts of glue. Most important thing is to make sure that it sticks and never comes apart. We can wipe away the extra. Using this method, we've got our 4 connection points, 2 for the hood, 2 for the front fenders and chest, and we can be reasonably sure that this part of the hinge will never ever fail. So there you have it, folks. We've finished the construction for our underframe for Bumblebee, just to give you an idea of how that looks. So just to recap, the length wise is on top. The connections that go across the bum and the shoulders are underneath, as well as these little stubs. We will discuss these stubs in part 2 when we start planning for the cardboard. We've got some double-sided Velcro or polypropylene strapping, whichever you prefer. Might be better to go with the Velcro. I've used both just to give you an idea. About 2 inches of overhang, 2 to 3 inches of overhang will be more than enough. The basic measurements are width of the shoulders, length from shoulders to bum. We taper this section to be about 2 inches narrower than the shoulders, and the connection points for here is roughly 1/4 the length of the entire frame. And we are ready to build some cardboard.